this close to John Entwistle, and you're standing there like, he loved that. He just made him go crazier.
Hi, everybody. This is Albert Bouchard from Blue Oyster Cult, and you are listening to All Over the Place podcast, where fun sanity never ends.
Hello and welcome back to All Over the Place. I'm your host, Eric Portvazic, and welcome everybody. Welcome back to All Over the Place. And once again, cannot thank you enough for liking, sharing, subscribing. We are growing more and more every week, and it's because of you. Greatly appreciated. Thank you so much, and please keep that up. And last week we had you share it with 11 friends in honor of our guest, Christopher Pereira. We're going to keep that up. 11. At least 11 friends share that. And I got one friend with me right now. Jim Culver, how are you?
I'm good, yeah. And let's remember, these go to 11.
That is correct. And with us today, we've got a drummer extraordinaire. And this guy is on the scene right now. He's promoting a volume 2 of a Rarities set, Rarities Oxhumed, volume 2, the music of John Entwistle and beyond. And this our guest today, he has got a huge list of musical collaborators. He's worked with Robin Zander from Cheap Trick, Billy Squier, Joe Walsh, Jack Bruce from Cream. My God, the list goes on and on. But with us today, Steve Luongo, thank you so much for being on all over the place.
I'm happy to be all over the place. Thank you. I live my life all over the place.
See, folks, we're a trend. We're getting out there.
Yes, and by the way, I think you should make it 13 today because that's a big number for Entwistle and myself. So 13.
I love it. See, folks, our guests are on board with getting the word out there. I love it. So, and Steve, I mentioned in the intro, you've got a volume 2 now with the Rarities Oxhumed, of course, a tribute and the lasting memory of John Entwistle, and 2 of my favorite bands, Van Halen and Hall & Oates. And that's right, Hall & Oates, a favorite band of mine. I won't deny it. They came up with their first greatest hits were respectively called Volume 1 or Part 1. And they never came back with a Part 2. You did. So hot on the heels a couple years ago for Rarities Oxhumed Volume 1. We've got Volume 2 now. Thank you for that. And, just please tell us about the process of getting so much music out there for Mr. Entwistle.
It's, well, at this point, it's a labor of love. It was difficult and easy, the best of times, the worst of times. We can go through all the anecdotal stuff. But when I was approached about doing a collection, it's not something I could have seen myself doing 20 years ago or even 10 years ago because the wounds of the loss, and I don't want to start off on a bummer, but the wounds of the loss were still too fresh. And now we're at the point where I really want to share what great experiences I had with John Entwistle as a friend, as a bandmate, as a business partner, as a mentor, as a big brother. And, what I've discovered over the years, we met in June of '87 and we became fast friends, and we did a lot of stuff in 15 years, had a lot of fun, made a lot of music, toured the world, and I felt like, ganging up with Deco at the right time, right place, right time. I have an archive of our live shows and, of course, our studio recordings. And it seemed like it was a good time to do this. It's been difficult from the standpoint that if you're going to make a statement on somebody else's work, you really have to make the right one. You have to know that you're doing the right thing. And I really believe that the material that I picked for Volume 1 and Volume 2 stood up. I thought it represented John as an individual, which he very much was an individual. It certainly pays respect to his career with The Who, but it also acknowledges that he was his own musician. He was his own guy, and had his own needs musically, which I'm happy that I was part of helping him fulfill some of that.
I love that. Absolutely. And it's, you mentioned, just combining both his own work and the Who. What was that like for you to find that balance between the music from the two different bands that he was in?
Well, it's John used to say that there would have been four Who's. If Keith Moon had was the if it was Keith Moon's Who, it would have been a California surf band. If it was Rogers, it would have been a country western band. If it was Pete's, it probably would have been a jazz band. And John's would have been what the John Entwistle band, what our band turned out to be, which was really just overblowing, playing every chop you have, doing everything that you can do to push the envelope, risky, cutting edge, improvisational, and just an all out audio assault. He loved playing live, and I think that one of the things, where there's a song on this record called "Endless Vacation," and it's actually written about the fact that he didn't get to tour enough in the halcyon days of the Who because they wouldn't do world tours for a year. They would go out for 6-8 weeks, a couple of months or whatever, and then they'd wait and write their next album. Be another year till they went out. And so he said, I mean, the hook in the song is "Nobody told me life up here was an endless vacation." And it's, the thing about John was that he loved going on vacations. He liked to deep sea fish. He went to all kinds of exotic places, but I think he would have rather been on stage than anywhere else. I know he would have rather been on stage than anywhere else. And he loved his fans, and he really loved any opportunity that he could get to blow their minds with his gifts. So
God bless him for it. And what was it like for you to lock in as the rhythm section with the Ox?
Well, it was. There were times when I've been blessed to play with a lot of incredible musicians. John was one of a kind, the best, in my opinion, the best rock bass guitarist of all time. But I'm used to being on stage with talented people, so I wasn't like overwhelmed. It's not like I came from a hack band and all of a sudden I'm playing with the greatest musician in the world. I had really had the good fortune of playing with some exceptional players in my life. So it seemed pretty normal. But then there were the times where I'd look over and I'd say, well, wait a minute, that's John Entwistle. And I think the thing about it is, somebody asked me the other day, did John try to get you to play a certain way? And I said, no, we never even talked about it. We met at a NAMM show, and I guess if for anybody that's watching that doesn't know what NAMM is, it's kind of like the car show or the boat show for music. It's every screw, every string, every nut, every instrument, every invention that has anything to do with music. And it's held twice a year, once in the summer, once in the winter. And all of the endorsees of products, like I endorse Zildjian and D-Drum and Vader and half a dozen other companies. And they all fly you out to, the big one is in Anaheim, California in January. And they fly you out and you do meet and greets, or you're at their booth. It's kind of like Comic-Con. It's very much like Comic-Con, but it's basically people meeting with their fans representing the different companies. So there's always one big jam session, right? There's always, there's a lot of satellite things that go on at the hotels or that go on the NAMM floor, but there's always one premium jam where, that everybody wants to play in. And I was introduced to John by my front of house engineer, Joe Berger. And I happened to be out at this particular NAMM show. It was Summer NAMM, 87, June, believe it or not, Chicago, at McCormick Place. And Joe arranges it so that John can meet, meet me and the band. I was playing with Rarities Choir at the time, and came up, introductions, hello, hello. And I said to him, being the shy, retiring wallflower that I am, I said, "You want to jam?" And he said, "Anytime." So that was a license to steal. I went down onto the NAMM floor and I said, "Who's having the biggest jam?" And they said, "Kramer." At the time, Eddie Van Halen was using Kramer, and it was the guitar of the '80s, especially the late '80s. Whoops, drumstick. And so I said, "Well, I'm playing with John Entwistle, and we'd like to jam." And they said, "Really? You're playing with John Entwistle? Okay." And this is '87. It was kind of towards the end of my run with Rat Race, and I'm staying at, if you don't book your hotel for NAMM like 3 months in advance, you're staying at the 2 Cent Motel, which I was staying at the 2 Cent Motel. And Kramer sends like a limousine that was longer than the facade on the front of the hotel. And, I'm t-shirt, jeans, and I get in the bed, the guy opens the door, I get in there, and John's staying at the Drake on Lakeshore Drive. So I tell the driver, Lakeshore Drive, the Drake, and he knows where it is. He takes us there, takes me there. And he gets out of the car, says, I'll get your VIP. And he goes and does whatever the limo drivers do. And all of a sudden, John comes walking down with Andy, his roadie, carrying his bass case. And he looks and he sees the Stretch. And then he looks at me and I'm like, "Hey." And he says, "Where are we going?" I said, "We're going to go jam." He said, "What are we going to play?" I said, "We can play some Who songs." He said, "I don't know any." I said, "Well, don't worry about it. We'll teach them to you." That was pretty much it. We drove for about 5 minutes in the car and pulled up to the Vic Theater. Now we've got blacked out windows on the car. It's evening, so you can't really see anything. We pull down an alley and we go down this very typical vaudevillian type of, dressing room stairs into this whole row of dressing rooms. And they put us in this room, and it's just the two of us. And all of a sudden, the rest of the guys in my band come in, and we knew. I mean, we played live at Leeds. We did Tommy. When we were kids, we knew all that stuff. And so he says, "Well, what are we going to do?" And so the guy said, "Well, we'll do this, we'll do that." We wound up doing Summertime Blues and Won't Get Fooled Again, and the Tommy medley from Live at Leeds, and Pinball Wizard. So he was, he figured, okay, well, these guys can play, but he still didn't know where we were or what we were doing. So the guy knocks on the door, the security knocks on the door, says, "Mr. Entwistle, 5 minutes." And he looks at me like, "What is this?" So don't worry, it'll be cool. So we go out into the hallway, and it's just packed with people, and I mean everybody's there. For you, Neil Schoen, because we bumped him, Leslie West. I mean, just the list of luminaries was pretty steep. So there's a security guy in front of me, Entwistle, the other guys in the band, and another security guy in the back. And they walk us to this flight of stairs. It's narrow flight of stairs for one person at a time. Oh man. And then all of a sudden he hears Dweezil Zappa say, "Ladies and gentlemen, John Entwistle." And the Vic Theater, thousands of people erupt. And he's like, "Oh crap." And we walk out on stage, and Andy plugs him in, and I get behind the kit, and everybody gets to their station, and we played the songs. We played them really well, because for us as a band, if you know the bass parts, you're in good shape. So we went through these 4 songs, and he was, I think, pleasantly surprised, somewhat astounded. And we went up to the green room after the show, and he was probably so relieved that we didn't embarrass the crap out of him. We just started gabbing and telling jokes, and we became instant friends just because, I wasn't going, "Oh, you're in the Who, how cool was that? Oh, what's it like? Oh, Pete." And I said, "Well, listen, I'm catching an early flight, so I'm going to bail out of here. This after couple of hours of just going back and forth. And he hands me a slip of paper and says, "Give me a call, mate. Let's stay in touch," which, being shy wallflower that I am, I did. And that started it. So to answer your question of what it's like to play with John Entwistle, it seemed totally natural, and it seemed like it's what I should have been doing. It's where I should have been. And we played so well together. You know, you hear about, you can take the greatest drummer in your mind and the greatest bass player in your mind, and if they don't lock together, you've got, mush. But if you get a good drummer and a good bass player and they do lock, they create something that's bigger than either one of them. Well, we created something that was undeniable to both of us, which is what prompted us to be, have this ongoing chatter and ignore everybody else in the room and just talk. And a few months, not a few months, a month or so after that, I got a call from the girl from Kramer. And she said, "Would John Entwistle like to play the K-Rock and Roll Up Your Sleeve Blood Drive?" I said, "Yeah, of course he would. There's no question in my mind. But let me call him just to be sure." So I called him up and I said, "John, we had been talking periodically over the past month, and I said, they want us to do this thing." And he said, "Okay, let's do it." And I said, "Well, since you're coming, can we do like 20 other dates?" And it was like, "Yeah, okay." And in that, on that run of dates, we realized that we had something that worked. We realized that that we created something that was satisfying to both of us musically. And it did. There was never, "I'm in the Who and you're in Rarities choir." It was never that. It was, "I like playing with you, you like playing with me, let's play." So around a very long way around the barn, it was very natural to play with him. It was very relaxed. I was able to just play the way I like to play, which is aggressive and loud and fast. And he was able to do the same. And it was, man, I mean, I could go on for hours about it, but that's pretty much the long and the short of it.
Well, I dig hearing that because, I'm in no way, shape, or form a bass player. I played bass at one time, but you lock in with your drummer and you find that ultimate pocket. And once you get it, and Jim, you're a drummer, you understand that. And so when you find that magic, that chemistry, it's just unbelievable. So that's great to hear that you had that just right off the bat with like one of the best.
Like we had been doing it forever, and probably I have to put a lot of it down to my exposure to the early Who. Most specifically Live at Leeds. When that album came out and I heard just the reckless abandon and, let's just go wherever we're going to go and do whatever we're going to do. The aggression and the bang, crash, and wallop of that record just blew me away. And that really, it really made me know that was the direction that I wanted to go. And I like fusion. I like time signatures. I like playing, avant-garde stuff, but I also like coupling that with real aggressive, heavy playing. And John just made that such an easy vehicle for me. And I have to think I did the same for him. I know I did because we played together till he passed away. And it was, and Jim, if you play, what it's like when your one is the bass player's one,
Yep.
And the thing that John and I had that was amazing was there was almost a telepathy that seemed to be there from the beginning, but over the years, I could look at him and know where he was going to go and vice versa. We used to do an exchange solo where he'd play something, I'd play something, he'd play something, I'd play something. And it was just, it was just like two guys out shooting the enemy. It was amazing. The funniest thing about John was when we reformed the band, we had the initial band with Rat Race Choir. Then I joined his band. We became business partners, and I worked with his band that was called The Rock, which was turned out to be the first incarnation of the John Entwistle band in '88. And then he did the Who in '89. We did some one-offs in '90, '91, and then we put another solid unit together in the mid '90s, '95. And when we started doing interviews for the band, because we really wanted to go out and tour for months at a time, we wanted to be out for the whole touring season. And we were doing interviews, and he was asked, well, what does a new band sound like? And he went, well, it's bass and drums and some other guys. And man, it was. I mean, every song was like a bass solo. It was amazing. It was just one of the most liberating musical experiences you could ever hope to have.
And if you've been in bands, folks, you know that it's typically the rhythm section that gets the shaft. So it's nice to hear something like that where it's us and some singer and a guitarist. Yeah, those guys too.
Yeah, it was. Well, I mean, that's a hell of a bass player. I mean, it's no disrespect to anybody else, but that guy redefined the lower register of music, and he was just. It was so easy to play with him, and because of the choices that he made, especially when we were improvising, it wasn't like, oh, wow, why did he do that? It was just, and it took me years after he was gone to look back at all the stuff that we did and see just how magical it was, because he enjoyed it so much. And he was a very generous bandmate or musical partner. He wanted you to be great. He wanted you to be the best there is, and because he believed he was the best there is, and he wasn't shy about it, and he was right. So it was, go ahead, play faster, play louder, play longer.
It's not bragging if you can back it up.
No, not at all. See, the thing about John was, we did several tours and good lengthy tours, and we decided at one point that we were going to record all the shows, which is where the live parts of Oxhumed came from those live shows. And we were out on the road for maybe 6 or 8 weeks, and then there's a big 10-day hole in the middle of our schedule. Well, you've got tour buses, you've got a truck, you've got crews and hotels and drivers and everything else. Excuse me. And you can't just stop. What are we going to do? Hang out at the Four Seasons for 2 weeks? I don't think so. So we called the office and we said, look, we need to keep playing because we're recording a live album. And obviously we want to be hot. We want to be on top of it and really, we don't want to cool off. Things are really just starting to pop. So the office calls up every place within striking distance of wherever we were. And they said, look, John Entwistle and his band want to play at your club. And it was like Juanita's Cantina or the old post office or the Seattle Firehouse. I mean, just the craziest places. And because there was no lead time to advertise, they'd have like 2 days before we showed up. And so there'd be 30 people in the audience, right? So you listen to these, when we were listening back to the recording, you hear this, bow, and then you hear, sounded like somebody was dropping eggs on the floor or something, a dozen people clapping. But he loved it. He didn't care. And that's why on both records, I left the audience applause. If I used tracks from those shows, I left 30 people clapping. I didn't go and get 100,000 people and have, because if you weren't there, you missed it. And the thing about John was he played the same way for 30 people that he played for 30,000. And we did both. And I was there for all of it. And he used to just love the thing that he loved about playing small places, because we did, we played more than our share of, mid-sized clubs or small clubs, especially in that one gap period, was that he was 5 feet away from the person who was watching him play. And when you're this close to John Entwistle and you're standing there like, He loved that. He just made him go crazier. So he's just playing for that one guy. He doesn't care how many people are or aren't there. This guy's locked into my thing, and I'm gonna fry his hair. And he did.
Folks, you're listening or watching all over the place, the podcast where the fun sanity never ends. And with us, we've got Steve Luongo, and we're talking about John Entwistle and the projects that Steve has been promoting the last couple of years now. Of course, right now, recently come out, we have Rarities Oxhumed, Volume 2. But very quickly, Steve, I want to get back to Volume 1. And we talk about how great a player John Entwistle was. I mean, he's the Ox, he's the Thunderfingers, he's the man. But you do something, and I'm so glad you included one of my favorite songs. And I correct me if I'm wrong, I know how fond John was of Under a Raging Moon. And thank you so much for including that. One of my favorite Roger Daltrey's. It's one of my favorite songs. But you play all the parts. And I'm going to see if I can pull this off again, because I've always loved some of my favorite drummers on there. You know, Martin Chambers from Pretenders, Cozy Powell, Carl Palmer, Zach Starkey, Mark Brzezinski, Per Vosnick. I hope I said Brzezinski correctly. And my favorite of all time, Stuart Copeland, Roger Taylor from Queen. You played all the parts. That is no mean feat. And here's the clapping right there for that. So thank you for including that one. So what was it like for you to just get inside the rhythms of all 7 of those guys?
Well, it was really, we kind of wanted to acknowledge Keith Moon, and it seemed like a good place to do it. And John had said to me, this is kind of a funny story. I was always into doing solos. I mean, I come from the Ginger Baker school of let's play for 20 minutes. And John said to me, when we first started doing Raging Moon, I did the thing. You probably can't see it on the record, but if you ever get to watch the videos of me doing the solo in Detroit, I do this thing, and he's not here, but I do this thing where I have a mechanical monkey that plays a beat. So when you're listening to that solo and you all of a sudden you start hearing this, that's the monkey. And so I'm holding him up to a microphone, and I'm playing with one hand and both feet. And that's kind of like my little showboat shtick for girls that hate drum solos. And John says to me, do you think you could make your solo a little longer? And I said, yeah, I could absolutely make it longer. Why? And he said, I'd like to be able to smoke a whole Winston 100. You don't have to ask me twice. So we had a few days off. I took a bunch of synthesizers, and you can hear at the end of the solo that's on Volume 1, the synthesizer plays and I play along with it, and it speeds up and I speed up. And that's, but that clicking sound that you hear in there, that's the monkey. That's the, Zippy. And John used to introduce him, Steve Luongo and Zippy and the monkey and, whatever I used at the time. But I wanted to, I loved to solo. In all the bands that I was in, I always played solos. And I would never play the same solo twice. I would never start it the same way. I would do, obviously, there would be places that I visit, but I loved the improv of just being able to do whatever was on my mind at that time. And John used to stand on the side of the stage and watch the solos with enjoyment. And it was like, so I got to do for him what he did for all those people in the front row. And if you get a chance and you search Steve Luongo drum solo, the one that really shows the monkey the best, I'm wearing a looks like blue tinfoil shirt at Pine Knob.
Rock and roll. It's rock and roll.
Yes, exactly. And it was hot as hell too. But it was, he wanted you to be great. He wanted, you don't go into war hoping that the guys on either side of you aren't as good a shot as you are. He wanted everybody to excel. And, if you can roar. And, he was very generous that way. And just a great bandmate, a great business partner, and as good a friend as you could ever hope to have in your life.
That is so cool to hear. Just someone who wants, all ships rise together. And that's just very, very cool to hear that. And Jim, my rhythm mate here, I'm going to pass it over to you, drummer to drummer there for Steve.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm going to say I've never had a monkey that kept the beat, because some of the musicians I played with would probably wonder why they were keeping me around if they had that on hand, because that's kind of their attitude about drummers. But yeah, no, it's some incredible drummers you worked with. Yeah, I mean, what's the? I'm definitely going to check out that solo that we heard about, but yeah, I mean, what's the key to that when you're doing something like a solo? You know, how much is too much? How much is too little? You know, how do you just kind of run with your instincts, or do you feel like there's an art to it?
Well, it's both. I mean, honestly, you know, when I look at a solo, and I've done, my solos are somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes long, and I look at them as musical pieces. They have movements to them. They have there's a connectivity between what I did and what I'm about to do, and then what I'll do after that. And of course, they end the same, because they ended with the synthesizer thing, which stops at a certain point. But there would be times where I would play for 5 minutes and have my tech start the synth, and there'd be times I'd just keep playing for 10 minutes and have them started. So it was all about the improv. And it really, I mean, you probably know as well as anybody, Jim, if you're in it and you're firing and it's working, you're going to stay in it. And if you're struggling, not that anybody else would know, but you know, if you're like 98% instead of 100%, maybe you're going to back off a little bit. And you know, I was always a double bass drum guy, so I love that whole just cascade of blistering notes. And I mean, I don't think you can, well, you certainly can play too much, but if you keep it interesting and you let people kind of get a grasp of what you're doing, they'll be entertained by it if it has some cohesion to it. It's like a poem, you know, or like a story. It has to flow. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and the end. And whether it's 3 minutes long, 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long, as long as you have that flow and you keep time, you're in good shape. And the way the monkey thing happened, I was playing, you know, it was early 70s, and I was, you know, kind of messing around with this waitress at one of the clubs that we played, and she bought me what's called Zippy. He was called Zippy, the drumming monkey, and he actually plays a beat. When you see, if you do watch that solo, you'll see he actually plays a beat. His hands are going dig 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 dig, and his right foot goes boom 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 boom, and his left foot plays a hi-hat, so it's boom boom chick boom boom chick boom boom chick boom boom chick. And if I hold his bass drum up to my vocal mic, you just hear the dum 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 dum, and I get to do all the double bass drum, you know, showboat and stuff with one hand, but I'm holding the monkey instead of just doing this and, you know, that thing. There's a purpose to it. And when the girls see the monkey come out and the spotlight goes on the monkey, all of a sudden it's, oh, look at the monkey. and you know, if you're gonna be a showboat, which I am absolutely a showboat, you've got to do it right. And you know, I always played a big set. I always prided myself on trying to play new things and invent new things. And the monkey just, you know, that became just, like I said, it was really a way to show off playing with one hand and two kicks. But, you know, and let me tell you what, it's hard to hold that thing still.
Yeah, well, you're bringing limb independence to a whole new level if you're holding a monkey that's doing half the work for you. I love it.
Exactly. And you know, I mean, is there too much? Yeah, I mean, you can play too much. I'm sure some of my solos, because see, I was always about, and Entwistle and I had this in common as well. Whatever the new thing was, I wanted one of those. And Moog came out with a Moog drum. It never really did anything. In fact, the only two people to get them were me and Billy Cobham. And what it was you plugged it into a mini Moog, and there was a thing like a sample and hold thing, and you could play, if you hit the drum harder, the pitch went higher, and it was just the coolest thing ever. And that's when I started, getting into playing against the time. This is early 70s, the beginning of electronic percussion. I had the syn drum and all that stuff. And, as long as you keep it interesting, it's as long as it's fun and it's entertaining and animated, and, then I think, take as much space as you can.
Long live rock and long live Zippy.
Yes, exactly.
I love. I think it was Mike Portnoy.
I should
have had the punching bag on stage. I think having Zippy up there is just as much, if not more, fun.
Well, it really was, man. It was like, when I would turn around and because sometimes, the funny part of it, sometimes my roadie would forget to change the batteries, so it'd be like bung, 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 bung. Whack it a couple of times to get him to come up to speed, but I just would make it part of the show. It was like, come on, man, what are you doing? We're out too late last night. It was just, you make it shtick, and
there's nothing can go wrong up there.
Yeah, and it's always nice to have somebody to depend on with you. So,
well, drummers are always accused of being either too fast or too slow, so you can't stand up for falling down with that.
No, that's I'll tell you what, in the Entwistle band, you couldn't be too fast, because that guy was as fast as it got, and the faster you wanted to play, he was right there with you.
So very cool. And I want with volume, I'm going to put up here along the ticker. So Rarities Oxhumed Volume 2. Make sure you check that out over at decoentertainment.com/John-Entwistle. And you can get the album at your favorite brick and mortar stores, also online. But if you exclusively through Deco, you can get some bundle packages. And Steve, tell us about those.
Well, there's, when we were doing when we came up with this concept of doing the rarities, and the first album, the Volume 1, has a couple of demos that John and I wrote for The Who that obviously never got made because John decided he had other plans. But I wanted it to be a diverse package. I wanted to do, they talked about doing a piece of jewelry. And, John had, and I'm sorry I don't have any of my props here with me. John had a family crest. Entwistle was in the book of crests. He had a family crest, and it was the Entwistle crest. And I thought, could we do something with, 3 like little diamonds or rhinestones in it that emulated his crest with Entwistle at the top? And they said, yeah. One of the guys at Deco is a jewelry guy, and he mocked up a couple of designs based on John's crest. And so they made a necklace and a keychain, and they decided that they would do that. They did I forget how big the booklet was that we did. I wrote, some paragraphs about each song, what it was about, how it came to be, and included a ton of, personal pictures that were in my collection that people probably had never seen before. And so those things. And then for Volume 2, they asked me if I would sign a flat of the album cover, which was done by Lee Stokes. Now, and he did a fantastic job on it. But the whole idea of the Entwistle thing, and you'll find this interesting, I hope. I've been close with Chris Entwistle, John's son, since he was a kid. And I've probably, we're still friends, and we still communicate. And when Deco approached me about doing the Rarities album, I called up Chris and I said, listen, man, I'm got an offer to do, John Entwistle Rarities. But I don't want to just call it Rarities, and what can we do? And he said, Rarities Oxhumed, right? Like exhumed, but he was the ox. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And all of a sudden in my mind, I'm seeing this album cover with us exhuming or oxhuming all of his favorite things. So if you look on the cover of Volume 1, there's his favorite brandy, his cigarettes, his favorite movies, books, pieces, articles of clothing, some of the weapons and armor that he created, and there's a building in there And the building was originally, I had originally designed it to be a Tower Records that was in disrepair, but branding would have been horrible. So we just made it into a crumbling building, and you can use your imagination. So when they asked me, and Chris, Chris was very helpful with all that. He told me about, things that were from before my time. Like John used to wear aqua velva, so that's from the '60s, right? and so I hid all these. Taylor Swift thinks she's the one that came up with the Easter eggs. No, 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 no. And so I hid all these Easter eggs all over the record. Things coming out of the ground, and it was just a whole lot of fun. And for Volume 2, I did it with his rigs and his basses. So it's all inside and throughout the album cover are all the different amps that he used over the years. He used a Sun Coliseum PA system, and he used high watts, and you can imagine. And all the basses that we put on there are all some of the iconic basses that he played over the years, and that's why they're coming out of the ground with dirt on them and vines and stuff. So if you get the bundle, I believe you get your choice of a key ring or a necklace, and you get a nice size print of the flat, which they had me sign, and it's a nice package. I mean, it's fun. And it was supposed to be fun. That's what we were all about. If it wasn't fun, we didn't want to do it.
I want to have fun all the time.
Exactly. I mean, and that he was all about fun. He was all about having fun.
And I can't believe I botched it. To have a good time all the time. There's the proper Spinal Tap quote. Yeah, I ombudsmaned myself within seconds. So, and I think it's so awesome that Christopher, his son, had the demented sense of humor runs in the family, and just that twisted. That's awesome.
When he said Oxhumed, it was like, John was that way. When we would write songs together, and I'd get stuck for a line, he'd see me looking perplexed, and he'd say, "What's the matter?" And I'd say, I have this line, no one listens, no one cares, and I can't come up with a line. And he'd say, "Who will answer silent prayers?" And he'd just walk away, and I would be like, "How did you do that, man?" He was so quick like that. And when Christopher said, I'm supposed to call him Chris, when Chris said Oxhumed, it was so Entwistle. It just was spooky almost. It was really. And there was a lot of spooky stuff about John. Do you know the story of Bogeyman from Volume 1?
I know the song, but I do not know. Let's take us on a ride.
Well, we're doing the TV show. And for lack of a better word, we did a kids TV show, if you can believe that, back in the '90s, and we had to write 13 songs and a theme song, which the theme song is Horror Rock, which is on this Volume 2, and we were bringing. I brought my cassettes of demos that I did to the studio, and he brought cassettes of his demos, and we're listening to demos, and he plays me this song, plays me Bogeyman, but all it is drums and him singing, and there was a bass part on there, and that was it. It was a demo. And it was a demo that he did for The Who, but The Who thought it was too humorous, and they passed on it. So we're listening to the track, and I said, "Who's playing drums on that?" And he said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, that sounds like Keith Moon." And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's him." That's like, "Oh, okay. Well, we have to use this, don't we? Do you have the multi-track?" And he said, "Somewhere. I'll find it." So I go back to the States, and John has a tape room that's the size of, I mean, it's ridiculous, just for his 2-inch tapes and the 1/2-inch masters. And they just line the walls, rows and rows, like very similar to the bookcase behind you, but it's all Who out.
Got a whole bunch more.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And so he calls me up and he says, "Well, I was in the tape room for an hour and a half and I couldn't find the tape." He said, and I really got frustrated. He said, I said, sod this. And I go to walk out, and all of a sudden I hear this great bloody bang. It scared the crap out of me. Boom, right? And he said, and I turned around, and it was the tape, but it was labeled on the wrong side. And I said, well, I guess Keith really wanted to be on the record. And he went, yeah.
Spooky indeed, yes.
And so that was it. And so we put it on. You know, when I got back with the rest of the guys in the band, we put it on multi-track, and we finished the song. I played some percussion on it. I sang, you know, with John on the vampires part, on the Bogeyman part, and we added guitars and synths, and we finished the song. So Keith Moon's actually on that first record, but you know, special guest.
And just as far as I'm concerned, the right choices with the Who songs on Volume 2. I can't deny it. I know it's Kenny Jones playing, but Eminence Front, one of my favorite Who songs. But then going back to Mooney, including Real Me. That's my favorite Who song of all time, and Entwistle's bass on that, phenomenal. So thank you for including both of those on that.
Well, you're very welcome. I mean, and the thing about Eminence Front, as well as Long Live Rock, those songs were never in our set list. And it's so indicative of what we used to do, the spontaneity of what we used to do. In the case of Eminence Front, you know, it's a tape loop that they play to, right? Our keyboard player in that band, Chris Clark, just starts playing it manually, and I looked at John and went like, yeah, and he went, yeah, and I went do that, and we just did it and jammed on that figure for, you know, until it fades out at the end. But that was something I don't think we did more than 2 or 3 times over all the years that we played. And same with Long Live Rock. That was Alan playing keyboards, and he just all of a sudden started playing the figure in the beginning, and you can hear everybody sort of say, yeah, oh, okay, okay. And then it just starts up, and we did it. So they were included on the record for a number of reasons, one of which not many people ever got to hear us do that. You know, we didn't do those things that many times. And the Tommy thing as well, the overture, underture, whatever it is, overbite. It was, the band was so like spontaneous, and it's what kept it so fresh, and it's why we always looked forward to going out and playing again, because who knew what it was going to be this time. It was fantastic.
Well, again, I'm glad you got it on there. It just made my Who heart happy.
So
definitely appreciate it.
Alliteration.
Yes.
It was, it made my Who heart happy too. And especially Young Man Blues and Shaking All Over and all that stuff. I mean, those were things that I used to listen to that stuff on Live at Leeds. I used to listen to that stuff and just be like, man, who are these guys? You know, what is this? And then all of a sudden to, you know, lift your head up in the middle of Young Man Blues or Shaking All Over and say, wow, I'm doing this with him now. That's pretty crazy. And he never said no to anything. I mean, it's just, you know, whatever we wanted to try, we would try. It was that kind of freedom and like I said, liberating.
Well, rock and roll bass got no better than John Entwistle. So Steve Luongo, thank you again for being involved with Deco Entertainment, giving us Volume 2 now to go with Volume 1. And of course, the documentary you did in Ox's Tale, the John Entwistle story. Check that out, folks, on Hulu while you can. And be sure to go to decoentertainment.com/John-Entwistle to get your bundle packages. Steve, thank you again so much for being here with us on All Over the Place. Appreciate it greatly. And thanks for keeping the music going from John Entwistle.
Well, Eric, Jim, it was a pleasure, man. I'm happy to come back and burn your ears off anytime.
Deal.
Done.
And we'll talk about a vinyl issuing of these Rarities Oxhumed at that point.
There's one thing that I'll tell you that I toyed with doing, and I didn't get to do it on this one, but the banter, and you can hear a little bit of it on volume 2, the banter that used to go on stage, the joking around, we're going to do the Boris Blues, no. There's so much of that, because John was not known for his, great stage chatter, but yet we used to go back and forth like we were kids in a band and nobody was there. I kept all of those, I isolated all of those little vocal segments, and I really toyed with the idea about putting a track of them on this record. And an interview that I did said that Elvis Presley put out a record of him just talking about songs on stage. Oh, if Elvis can do it, Entwistle can do it. So you never know.
Look forward to that. Steve, again, thank you so much, folks. Be sure to come back real soon with more from all over the place, where the fun sanity never ends.
All over the place, where the fun sanity never ends.